Greetings, everyone. My name is Stephen Neely. I'm your co-host of the virtual Dalcroze meetup. I am here with such a great group of individuals live in the Zoom, but really on my heart at the top of the list is my dear friend Veronica Bileski, my co-host and co-founder of the VDM. We are thrilled to have everybody together and to have such a cool agenda for the night. Veronica, I'll invite you to say hello.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. It's been like a month since we had a meetup, so it's always fun to just take a break and then see people that want to come back. So thanks for being here.
And taking a little break, I think, probably helps a little bit that we have such a nice crowd here tonight. We all needed a break. Sometimes you just have to take a break. We have a full agenda, all dedicated to this master teacher and renowned teacher, Bob Abramson, or Dr. Bob, as some people knew him. But before we get to all of that, we want to honor our sort of routines here. We're going to have a quick, and I mean quick, we're going to go 2 minutes here, a quick breakout room where I hope you all will introduce yourself to whoever you end up with in the room. Please tell them your name and where you're located and who do you teach, or who did you teach, or who might you teach, or answer it any way you like, but that's our tradition. So ready, set. There's going to be, you get 2 minutes, 5 people in a room. Ready, set, go.
Fantastic.
Too short, Stephen.
That's how it goes. You got to get it moving. There's no time to be dilly-dallying here. We have things to cover. So it's good to see you. If you didn't quite have enough time, maybe you can talk to people in the chat in the background. We have a full agenda. Before we get into the main course here tonight, though, we do have a couple quick announcements. Veronica, do you want to hit the first couple?
Yes, can you make me co-host meanwhile?
Yes, I'll do that.
So Kai Liu is giving a masterclass this Saturday if you live in North America or South America, or no, is it? Yeah, it's Saturday or Sunday if you live in Europe or Africa or Australia or Asia. So check your dates, and we're really excited for his class. If you scroll down at the bottom of the agenda, I've pasted his class description. We got it kind of late, so we are just like sending it out wherever we can, and it looks really great. So I'm looking forward to that. And maybe Stephen, you can say a couple more words about Kai because I haven't actually met him yet.
Yeah, if you've not, I mean, I've met Kai only a couple times, always in Geneva, and he's wonderful. He's just like smartest guy, and he is a really talented musician. He does a lot of things, but one of his sort of heart's loves is jazz, jazz piano, jazz improvisation, and so he's a real master in that space, and he's actually using many of those skills in his masterclass. So he's going to be talking about specific jazz repertoire, and so we're just really excited to feature him. We're pretty sure that not too many of our normal crowd would have had a chance to work with him in person. So we think it's a really big deal, and I hope that everybody will sign up and attend Kai's class. So really excited for him. Also on our agenda, I just want to double check. It's just, we just want to say the words Geneva and ICDS out loud. So this summer is the Congress in Geneva. It happens every 4 years. You don't have to have a diploma to go. Anybody can go. You can go to the Institut Jacques Dalcroze website and register and hope that there's still room. They do cut it off at some point if too many people sign up, but it isn't based on credentials. It's just based on how many seats are in the rooms. So hopefully there's still some space, and that maybe you are looking for an excuse to go to Europe if you're not there. So we encourage everybody to support the Institute and the amazing work that they do there. It's always so cool to meet people from all over the world who come together every couple of years to to the Institute. And then in a similar fashion, we have the International Conference of Dalcroze Studies will be happening the first week of August for 3.5 days at the first week of August at my institution at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, PA. We will be featuring about 95 presentations in 3.5 days. Most of the time, there are at least 4 things happening at once. There are proposals accepted from 20 countries and 5 continents. It's a big deal. There are performances, lectures, workshops, research papers, practice papers, and all kinds of performances going on. There is a special keynote by the New York City artist Meredith Monk, who is a National Arts Award winner, was given to her by President Obama, and also the Grammy Award-winning vocal ensemble Room Full of Teeth will be here for a special concert. We are bringing them in for the conference, and they are being choreographed. Half of that concert will be choreographed by our local dance company in residence, who's also in residence in our Dalcroze Training Center, this group called Attack Theater, and we just think the world of them, and we're just super excited for all of that. So come to Pittsburgh, for goodness sakes. All right. Plenty of talking. Veronica, I hand it back over to you. Who we got to hear from first?
So today we're continuing this series we called Lessons from Our Teachers, where we focus on one really influential teacher, and we bring together some of their former students and colleagues, and would love to just hear their reflections, memories of specific activities, or a really important takeaway, or something that teacher really taught them how to see or perceive. So we're so grateful to have 3 of Dr. Bob's former students here. And so we'll hear first from Bill Bauer, and then from Marlene Yenny Maitland, and then from Patrick Seria. And then we have 2 more video recorded reflections from people who couldn't be here live. So we'll ask you to kindly limit yourself just to 5 minutes at the beginning, and then we can always come back and circle back as people have questions or comments, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again. I will give you a 1-minute warning. So Bill, we'll take it away with you.
Okay. I'm very happy to be able to speak about Bob Abramson and his impact on me. It was huge because Bob was huge. He loomed large. He really had a grand vision of the practice. I think he understood it not just as a form of music education, but really as a form of personal development. He also understood it in a larger political sense of how it could be a force in liberating individuals and potentially help to build a free society. And I respected him greatly because of his grand vision. Although I think sometimes that grand vision also got the better of him. He could be harsh in his teaching and uncompromising because he felt very strongly, very passionately about his ideals. I learned about Bob actually before I went to college at Albany State University. I heard from an old girlfriend who was going to Manhattan School of Music about this wacky teacher who had his students walk around and conduct in 5. And it struck me as interesting that he liked the music of Stevie Wonder, which not too many classical music teachers were into at the time. And then I had the opportunity of singing in the chorus at Albany State, where I started my undergraduate training. Don Guidotti had just come up there from Manhattan School, and he regaled us with stories of his friend Bob Abramson. After I left Albany State, I made the point of going back up there when Bob gave a workshop. And after the workshop, my friends and I all met for lunch, and they said, "So Bill, what did you think?" And I said, my eyes full of awe, "He's God." And he had that way of wowing people. He really could make a deep impression very quickly. And I think it was because he was so passionately committed to this practice. I then sought him out because I was living near Manhattan and studied with him privately for several years before I did my certificate training with him in 1983. And Ruth Alperson, who's also here, was the other diplome in the faculty that was giving the certificate that year. And that was really the first year that Bob launched his Manhattan Dalcroze Institute. I ended up getting my license there in 1989, I think it was, or 1990, also with Ruth and Bob. The one thing that I feel a little bit sad about is that Bob felt very strongly, as did his teacher, Hilda Schuster, that he had become the only person who really deeply understood what Jacques Dalcroze was trying to do in his practice. Bob called it a system. He felt that the solfege was an essential part of it. Because of that, he came to feel that going to study in Geneva was a waste of time. And that's deeply unfortunate because I did end up going and studying there, but I think I would have gone much earlier, and I would have had more years benefiting from the training that I got in Geneva if I'd been willing to challenge his idea. But I revered him so much that when he said it was a waste of time, I assumed Bob knew what he was talking about. When he died in 2008, I began a long journey of really coming into the practice for myself. And after a while, I even stopped trying to be Bob Abramson because nobody could ever be Bob Abramson. And
1 minute warning.
Yes. And yet, of course, your very first mentors, you do try to model your early efforts after them. That's only natural. But in any event, I'm so happy that I had the chance to study with him. He was a father figure for me, and really he helped me to grow up. And I'm always grateful for that.
Thank you so much, Bill. We appreciate it. Marlene.
Hi, everyone. I discovered Bob through Joy Yellen. I was a founder of the Early Childhood Music and Movement Association, and while I was putting a conference together, we had Joy Yellen on the roster, and I went into her workshop, and probably within 3 to 5 minutes, I was blown away by the experience, the Dalcroze experience. And she had asked if anybody wanted to improvise with her, and my hand went up, and no one else wanted to improvise or was frightened. And it was, I became good friends with Joy Yellen, and she said, you have to go and see Dr. Bob in New York because that's where you live. And I said, okay. And I went, my first day experience, I had no idea what I was walking into. And he pointed to me and said, you're not going anywhere. You're staying here. And I'm like, okay. And he really did very healthy things for me, even though when he was a little off the hook, he would kind of ruin the experience. He was usually always right, and always right. But he was blunt. But it was I learned so much from him. Some of the things that stayed with me artistically was never assume anything. And he gave us a lesson one day on how to boil an egg. And it was brutal because, what do you mean? Where's the kitchen? What is the kitchen? How do you use the stove? He had a lot of foreign students in this particular class, but that particular class stuck with me because it's a very important it's very important to have that on your mind when you're a teacher. Don't assume that just because someone is good with one thing, they know everything else. So that was very deep for me, and always trying another way. That's essential for being an artist too. It's really deep in my experience as a pianist and a musician. The first assignment I remember that he gave us was go out and find 100 examples of a steady beat. That was very profound because then it examples from life of accelerando, decelerando, sforzando, and it was really put a lot of color into my personal artistic repertoire. And I still use it today in my classrooms when I'm teaching inner city children. You have to start with stuff they know. And it's very helpful. It brings them into the classroom, which is what Bob, the effect he had on me. I think one of his greatest gifts was his nuance and his attention to nuance. What do you mean a skip? What kind of skip? And then we learned like 12 different types of skips, which would then be reflected in the music that we played. It was just wonderful. And the anatomy of a beat, and it's all in the preparation, the anacrusis. And one of the examples he would give, which I still use today, I'll have a class at attention, I'll go, hey, go. And no one comes in on time, remember that? And everybody comes in together. I mean, I have first graders that can knock that out of the ballpark. Just start and stop together. It's a thrill. So he gave me a lot of tools. Another outstanding lesson was I was in his graduate class in Juilliard. I would be assisting. And the way he would, well, the graduate students that were in this class, they had musical challenges. And to see him problem solve was amazing. There would be a cellist who would playing a minuet. And of course, we, as the audience, we had to show the performer what they were playing with our body language, with our conducting. If they were boring, if we're going like this, that's not what the person's playing. Be honest, be brutally honest.
1 minute, Marlene.
And it turned out that the cellist didn't know how to dance the minuet, knew nothing about the minuet. And that was a very valuable lesson too. If you're studying a piece of music, you need to know something about the music, the history, and as well as the composer. There were just so many wonderful assignments that he gave. Conducting with every part of your body, for example, was a great challenge. I think the best time I ever had was when I had to teach for 40 minutes without saying a word. It was a great experience, and I had to come up with manipulatives and have very precise body language. And I that's all the time in my classroom. 3 words, he would say, no more than that. And he was right, because children's ears just go after a few words, and they want to work right away. And so he's in my ear all the time, especially with my smile. Being brutal, he came up to me screaming in my face, "You're so serious. You're such a serious student. You have to smile." So I started smiling. I guess I wasn't, and my face hurt. He was correct. And I see students every once in a while who are just so serious, and I work with them privately. I'm not brutal. But a lot of valuable everyday things, and particularly adding to my artistic sensitivity. It was, and I had many private lessons with him on the piano. I knew him for about 10 years, hung out with him a lot, spent a lot of time out listening to tons of music. I was very lucky that way. I spent a lot of private time with him, and we got along. We didn't talk too much, but we did a lot of playing and interacting.
Great. Thank you so much, Marlene. That was
Thank
really
you.
lovely.
Patrick.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, everybody. Marlene and I were actually in class together with Dr. Bob, and I'll tell everybody that I came into Eurythmics completely and totally by accident. I was a percussion major in college, and when I got out of college, I worked as a touring drummer for about 8 years, and I came off the road, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I started giving early childhood music and movement classes in a little studio here in New Jersey. And the summer of after my first year of doing that came, and I was looking for a place to go to get some new ideas and some inspiration. And I stumbled across Eurythmics. I began reading about it. I had no Eurythmics classes in college at all. And I read about a 3-week workshop in New York at the Juilliard School, and I signed up for it. And I had no idea of what I was going into, and Bob was the teacher, and I walked in that first day, and he was standing at the door, and I didn't know him, and he greeted me with this kind of impish grin on his face, and I remember thinking to myself, this guy he kind of looks like Yoda, and little did I know that he was going to become Yoda for me, basically. So but that first day of class, he right off the bat, he did an exercise, and again, I was a percussion major. He did an exercise where we were walking quarter notes, and he was just adjusting the dynamics on the piano. And I remember after that first exercise, actually being mad that I didn't have Eurythmics classes in college, because I had never experienced a quarter note like that in my life. And then we went into solfege classes, and again, for me, solfege class in college, you were sitting in a chair, and all of a sudden I was up and moving around the room and doing solfege moving, and it all just blew me away. And having those classes with Bob made it even more intense and more cool. But I will tell you 3 things that he said to me that they're in my head every day. The one thing he said was the first day of class, he sat everybody down, and in that class, it was really cool because there was some musicians, there was a couple of dancers, and there were actually some actors in the class too. And he said, he asked the class, what is your favorite performing art? And people would say dance, music, and drama. And he kind of paused for a minute, and then he said, my favorite performing art is teaching. And I had never thought of it in that capacity before. And that completely blew my mind completely. And so that's the way I kind of think of it now. I work with special needs and at-risk students, and every day I go in and I have that mindset of I have to come at it from a very highly creative perspective. So that was something he said that I will never forget. And the second thing he said to me that I still use to this day is he said, every day when your kids come into class, they're going to bring you some kind of a gift. Maybe it's going to be something wonderful that is going to make your day, or maybe it's going to be something harsh that's going to show you that whatever subject it is you're trying to teach, you're not doing it very well. And so I'm always listening to the kids. I'm never trying to be above them, or I'm always letting them give to me based on just from what Bob said that day, how they're going to bring you gifts. And he always said you have to listen for them and watch for them. Those 2 things had a huge impact on me. And then the third thing was that he did that was so amazing was he was, and Marlene touched on this, he was very into gesture and making sure that when you taught your class, you used your body, and not just in the way you moved through the music, but in the way you were teaching your class. And that proved to be very important for me, because to this day, I teach nonverbal special needs children, and gesture has become a huge piece of what I do with those kids. And I don't know if it was supposed to happen that Bob told me that, but it's become such a huge part of my teaching. And he was just a good guy. I enjoyed him. He was harsh at times, definitely, but I feel lucky in that I think I I got the kind of Bob Abramson 2.0. He was a little mellower, I guess. But I literally took piano lessons with him after I finished my certificate with him. And I had my last piano lesson, with him 3 days before he passed away. So I consider myself very lucky to have worked with him that long. And then one thing that I just want to end with, and Bill's kind of said this too, I think that Bob was very into the power of eurythmics, not just in the capacity of music teaching, but for all teachers. And that's kind of a message that I've kind of inherited from Bob, and I'm very passionate about putting that out there too. I think it's such a powerful way for all teachers to teach. So, but that's everything that some things that I took from Bob that are my favorite. But he was a good guy, a great guy. I'll never forget him.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Appreciate it. I'm going to share a video recording from Fritz Anders. Fritz lives out in, I think in the Denver area, somewhere in Colorado.
Greetings from Colorado. My name is Fritz Anders, and I was a student of Dr. Bob Abramson at the Juilliard School from 1995 to 1997, where I earned my certificate from him. He was the absolutely most influential person in my life. To that day and to this day, I teach K4 public school and have all these years, and I take him into my classroom with me every day, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, as I teach this wonderful approach to music called Dalcroze Eurythmics. Two of the most important lessons he taught me: that there can be absolutely no mediocrity in the arts. It's always your best. And when you really look at what Dalcroze was doing, I think the greatest sin that we can commit, and what Dalcroze teaches us not to do, is to ever be and go on inertia. You have to be that omnipresence at all the time and create beautiful art. Bob not only taught we can't have mediocrity in our art, but in our dress, in our friendships, in our speech, in our pursuits of all kinds. He was absolutely taught me to never fail in passion or clarity. He left such a wonderful written legacy too. I think almost as Dalcroze of himself, which Bob always encouraged: go back to the source. And I often do go back, and I always take into my classroom, what would Bob do? And then what would Emile Jacques Dalcroze do? He left such a legacy. I think the most important, just writing it down, would be this book, Teaching Music, and it's Bob down here. It's an expensive book, but if you can get your hands on it, it really explains, I think, in such crystal clear terms, the whole approach in English. You have his two wonderful books, which are great, that we did. These are harder to get. This is, I think, is his masterpiece, and it's very hard to find if you can get a hold of it. Music as a second language, and there's Bob's writing to me. I keep always wonderful to have his text with us. I remember teaching a solfege lesson with him once, and he always encouraged us to have fixed do it all the time. And he said, I said, Dr. Bob, may I please have a C as I was teaching? I had I had a lady that studied with Nadia Boulanger, for God's sakes. And I said, may I please have a C? And he goes, what shade of C would you like, mon cher? And he put C in A minor and C diminished, and I was all over the place. And he said, the Germans proclaim, the French suggest. Which do you prefer? And right then I said, Bach and Beethoven be damned. I'll give my heart to Ravel and Debussy. He was such a genius. He would just stop in the middle of a lesson. And we had one afternoon where he went over just the incomparable melody, the perfect construction of Ravel's Bolero. We spent a whole afternoon just dissecting and taking apart. It was wonderful. For my lesson, he had me teach. And I remember we were teaching children from Harlem, and I spent all weekend, he told me on Friday, you need to teach the subject of dynamics. So I worked out the most beautiful, perfect lesson, Dalcroze lesson on dynamics. I get there, I teach a few little activities, and then he comes up to me in a stage whisper in front of everyone, because everyone's watching you teach, and he says, switch to durations now. Oh my Lord, what a lesson. Scared me to death, but thank goodness I had it in my toolbox. And I went and I switched to duration to long and short sounds. And one child broke a crayon. And he said, my crayon broke. And I just took it and I ran with it. I said, well, we were taking dictation, a graphic dictation. And I said, let's use the long part. Look at the long line. And so we did it. I remember Bob walking around going, genius, 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 pointing at me. And that was, I could live on that compliment. Even to this day, it's 30 years later. Bob taught through terror. He didn't put much concentration. We had a large class, but he really concentrated about 5 or 6 of us. And I think he was nearing the end of his life. And he just, again, had no time unless he saw something in you. And he really, really took and taught through terror. And if you haven't experienced that, that is a hell of a way to learn. I had to put up all my ethics aside, what were good, bad, and different. And I just said, here's this monolith, here's this genius. I shall be the pupil. And it's a wonderful way to learn because, as Martha Graham said, there's really only 2 types of art, good or bad. I remember decades later meeting Ann Farber, and I said, oh, I was a disciple of Bob Abramson. And she goes, disciple's the right word. And she took her arthritic hands and embraced me. And then she pulled me back and she said, Bob was my lover, he was my enemy. And he was a dragon of a human being. And yes, he was. And he was a wonderful dragon. And I feel so very fortunate that I was forged in his fire.
This is hold this up now?
All right, so we got Fritz, and then we have one more little video that we can share, and this one's short, and I'll just give it to you. One second, and let's get it here and play. Hey everyone, this is my good friend Chung Park. Chung is the conductor of orchestras at St. Olaf, and we've had some great opportunities to work together over the years. And I swear every time we ever worked together, the name Bob Abramson would come up as Chung would sort of tell some stories about time where he was introduced to Dalcroze work. So I thought I'd call him up and say, hey Chung, tell us a little bit about your time with Bob Abramson.
I'd love to. So I only spent 3 weeks with Bob Abramson at a seminar at Juilliard. You know, what they say is when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I was definitely very ready to meet Bob. And so I jotted down a few thoughts. And the first is that I think there are a handful of teachers whom I consider to be transformative. And to the extent that I feel that they may have even kept me from leaving the field. And Bob Abramson is definitely one of those people. He showed me what was possible, what a truly complete musician looks like. He also showed me so many things that seem obvious now, like teaching one thing at a time. I can still hear him saying that, one thing at a time, and that rhythmic patterns have shapes. These are things that were completely novel to me, believe it or not. And these are tools that I still use every day. In fact, it's safe to say that even though I only knew Bob for 3 weeks, I use something I learned from him every time I teach. So I owe him a lot. For the 3 weeks we spent together, I'm very grateful, and I'm really glad that I crossed paths with Bob.
Wow, so cool. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And then you've gone on and I know you've hunted out some Dalcroze opportunities for you and for your students over the years. And I've had a chance to hang out with Chung a bit and watch him teach, and he is a whirlwind. Such a dynamic teacher. It's been a real pleasure to hang out with you. We just want to say thanks for taking a couple minutes to tell us a little about your memories with Dr. Bob. So
very, very happy to do it. I'm a huge fan of Dalcroze. I talk about it all the time. And like I said earlier, or alluded to earlier, I don't think I'd be here. I certainly wouldn't be as effective if it weren't for Dalcroze. And I think it's for everybody. And I think everybody should experience it. It will change your life, be transformative.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to stop this now. Thank you so much, Chung. You go. All right, so look at us. We got a good 20 minutes where we could maybe say hi for a couple minutes. So we had 5 people. I know there are others in this room who knew Bob and knew him very well. I only knew him a little bit, so I'm not going to lead this conversation much at all. I did get to join him in class, I think maybe just twice, and I shared a number of emails with him, but all kind of near the end of his life. We were back and forth as I was had a leadership role at the DSA, but there's way more interesting things in the room. So would anyone like to either comment on something that we've already heard tonight or add something new? Go ahead, Joe.
I came to Dr. Bob as a dancer who was and teacher of Delsart who was invited to visit him in his class at Juilliard. And we bonded immediately, and he invited me to stay and come as often as I wanted. And I loved every moment of it. I experienced something as someone who loved music and had danced and sung all of my life. Music had felt like a living, breathing force in my world. It was always alive. And so many people who knew about music, had gone to music school, it seemed dead in their hands. And I couldn't understand that. And then I also thought that I couldn't be a musician because I couldn't do those dead things that they did. And in Dr. Bob's rooms, I was a musician because I could make my body move like every sound that existed. And then I could hear music even better and more fully and more clearly. And I still teach the things that he taught me all the time, and not just if I deal with music, but I'm just coaching a young girl on some Shakespeare and how language has rhythm in it. And we must find the rhythm in language. And there, inside of a sentence, there's a cadence. And all of that just lives and lives and lives. And to all of you here, I would like you to know, Bob died in my arms. I took him to the hospital for the test that he had, the biopsy that burst in his lung. And when they said they had to pull the plug, I had remembered a promise to him that I had made, that if he felt like dying so much that Carl was gone, that I would hold him and not let him go alone. And I climbed into the bed with him and held him when they pulled the plug. And so my bond with him is very deep and very long and eternal. And I was there for him at the very last moment.
Thank you for sharing that, Joe. And so powerful. Well, I don't know how you follow that, but we should try because we have a little more time that we can talk together. Is that a hand, Alice? I think, and then Ruth. Alice is going to try to unmute. We see your hand, Alice. Can you find the unmute?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I hope my connection is a little bit more stable than it has been. Yeah, I didn't get as much of an education from Bob as I would have loved, but I do remember a workshop he gave on Mozart K545. And it was amazing how he illuminated the heart of the beauty of Mozart's simplicity. And people there were in tears. I mean, he was just such a genius at penetrating to the heart of the music. And little phrases of his still spring to mind when he decried the way that some people treat playing the piano as putting the notes in the right slot. I remember that. And he looked to see the energy so notes were not, and durations were not a mathematical relationship, although they are. But that's what's wrong. And that's what originally drew me to Dalcroze, is that you can explain the math behind all the notes to a child and they still don't believe it and they don't know what to do with it. But when you bring it to life and find, as he put it, the energy, the different emotive impact of eighth notes compared with quarter notes. He gave a whole workshop on Frère Jacques, and it was so wonderful that he made so much out of a simple little song that's what I remember most, and I'm so grateful to him for that. We don't treat music like it's math. It's really so much more. It incorporates the whole world of movement and life, and I'm very grateful that I was able to experience. In fact, I wrote an article for the Dalcroze UK journal about it at the time. So I have to look that up and see. I probably had a better memory then of what he explained, but it was quite phenomenal. And I wish that we had more video of how he did it, because it's quite remarkable.
Thank you. Ruth, did you have a hand up?
Yes, recently I had occasion to meet with Bill Bauer, and I shared something with Bill that I'd like to share now. And I mentioned to Bill, well, Bob and I taught a summer course for the first year was 1983, and Bill, you were one of those students in that group. And the last one was in 1994. So I remember a lot of phrases Bob used. One is, you get it right, but you're not expressive. And so he referred to that as winning the game and losing the experience. And then playing for movement as playing expressively for movement, giving an invitation they can't turn down. I mentioned to Bill that some of the most brilliant teaching I saw Bob do was with children. He was so charismatic, and he could tell a story like no one else. And there was one time in particular, he had a bunch of kids who were a little bit tough, and he started telling a story about rabbits. And Bob sort of identified with bunnies and rabbits, and he just delivered it so beautifully and with so much warmth, and his descriptions were so rich. And he didn't ask the children to be bunnies or do anything. The children gathered on the floor, and as Bob narrated the story, they became the bunnies. It just happened. It was really lovely. And that's something I will never forget, that the children were transformed into bunnies just from the telling of the story. So it's quite beautiful, memorable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. Other thoughts? Yeah, thank you, Greg.
So I was at the summer workshop in 1998 and 1999 when I was, I turned 21 my second year there. This brings back so many memories, but I just remember when Bob would go to the piano and start to play, how it absolutely taught you how to move and taught you how to do whatever he was working on. Just some of the most compelling playing for movement I've ever experienced in my life. And if it was your birthday, you got a happy birthday improvisation from Bob. And I just will never forget the craziness of his improvisation, actually with Danny Catania on my 21st birthday there. Anyway, it's just great hearing all this, and brings back so many memories.
Thank you so much, Greg. We still have about 10 minutes, so we can continue to share those sorts of ideas, or I suppose we could also either try to recall exercises or talk about ways, more ways that some of this teaching has influenced others, or, has broadened or turned into other things. Francoise.
Well, I have just one memory. I think I was 17 years old or something like that. And Bob Abramson came to Geneva to teach during a Congress. And it was like an earthquake for me, and I was so impressed. And I would have just left Switzerland just to go to New York if I had the opportunity to do so. And when I'm listening to all of you who really benefited from his teaching, I'd like to know if there is any possibility. Alice talked about something she wrote a long time ago. Is it possible to have some information about how he was teaching? I remember him as a wonderful improviser and having so much energy and such a freedom that I was seeking for. I don't know how you say that. Anyways, but if we could have access to some articles or things about him, I would be very grateful.
Well, I'm sure the VDM, we can help with that some. I'll ask this community, if you, so Alice, but also the rest of you, if you're aware of any references that we can link to, we'll take a little bit of effort to try to find a couple of those links. I know the DSA had some contributions when Bob passed, and there were some articles written there, so maybe we can find access to that. And maybe people in the room are aware of other references or things that we could link to that would, that we can, as a follow-up to this meeting, that we can include. So thank you, Francoise. And so again, if any of you have those links, please send them, either put them in the chat here and or email them to Veronica or me. And we'll try to get a couple of those citations together. What else? Very good.
Patrick and Marlene
Thank you.
and Jared. Awesome.
So I think Patrick's trying to unmute.
Can you hear me? Am I good?
There you go. You did it.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just wanted to share one more quick story. In one of our sessions with, I ended up studying with Bob for 3 years and ultimately getting my certificate. But in the second year that I was with him, he would bring in young children from New York and would teach a demonstration class. And I'll never forget one session he taught a class, and he was always big on don't talk too much when you're teaching. Let the music speak and let your body speak, whatever the subject you were trying to teach. And he taught the entire class, I think it was about 10 children, and he literally didn't speak one word. He just used his piano and his gesture, and it felt to me like I was watching like some kind of a wizard or something. It was the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. And that, again, I know I talked earlier about gesture, but that moment to me was proof that how much music and physical movement together was such a powerful way to get through to kids and young people especially. And I know Ruth kind of alluded to that as well, but that was just one more great memory I had of Bob. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thanks, Patrick. Marlene, you had a follow-up?
Yes, when it came time for my certificate, Bob usually expected his bunny story to be part of your exam. And all year, I would say, he said, "You ready? You're going to do the bunny story?" I said, "I'm not telling you what I'm doing." He empowered me to do my own thing. And I ended up doing the fire-breathing dragon. I still do it, stories similar to this day. I did bring the house down. It was amazing. And I have such joy when I teach my children because he empowered me to be very expressive, and I don't have to say much. It's wonderful. I talk all day long on through my keyboard. It's just such joy. And that was because of my exposure and time I spent with him.
Thank you. Jared Balance, it's great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you as well. Dr. Bob or Dr. Abramson, probably like the person that you had on there, probably kept me in music. I was kind of, when I studied with him, I was kind of at the end of a graduate school, and I was kind of getting maybe burned out with it. And he really, by bringing the music back in such a powerful way, and the expression really helped me to recapture my love of music. And one of the ways he did that was something he called phonomimesis, where he said, you know, you have to mime the sound. Every sound, you have to find a movement that exactly matches that sound. And for every movement, then you can find a sound that exactly matches that sound. And I'm not a pianist, I'm a cellist. He helped me then through that to be able to improvise much more musically and convincingly on the piano. Through connecting the gesture to then what you did on the piano to make it come out. Because, you know, I was trying to improvise, but I'm not, you know, a trained pianist. But he helped me to then get away from the technical aspects and use the movement, you know, that we improvised to then use that to create a similar sound through the piano. And it was really, really very powerful the way he did that. I guess the one other thing that maybe was mentioned, you know, I'm a cellist, and he did a whole class where he went through all of the dance steps for the standard Baroque dances that you'd find in the Bach cello suites or any of the Bach keyboard suites. And we learned how to step them, and then how that would relate to our articulation, our shaping of the phrases, and stuff like that. And I still use that today when I'm preparing a Bach suite or when I'm teaching one. I teach my students the dance steps, have them sing the melody and do the dance steps along with it. And it just transforms how you feel that music to actually know and feel the dance that's behind it.
So good. So good. There have been so many things tonight that even, I mean, it's both been, I think, a really lovely tribute to Bob Abramson, and also no shortage of great nuggets of things that we all can take with us as we're kind of planning our next bit of teaching, which is, I think, very much in line with what we hope for these. We have 3 minutes, which is enough time to either just say thanks and remind you of what's coming up, or if we got one more, does anybody else have anything else they want to go for it? Selma, our resident historian and dear friend from the North.
I also met Bob in 1983. That year was mentioned several times through a friend. He had been involved in the Connecticut College School of Dance, which is what became later the American Dance Festival. And so he knew Marcia Siegel, who's now very known as a dance critic, but they were friends, because she at that time was working in the office in publicity and, you know, sort of organizational work. And so later on, I knew her from the 60s, but later on she introduced me to Bob. And I asked him if he would consider doing a workshop for the grad studies course I was teaching as a guest at New York University in the summer of 1983. And I was sort of hesitant to ask, but he said yes. And so he came and taught this group of strangers, really, the most wonderful class. He had this way of meeting a new group and making instant contact that was just incredible. And I saw him do this several other times, because he would come to give workshops or special one-off or two days of a weekend, sort of teaching in Toronto, where I live. But he really was someone who I think had such incredible focus. He had total commitment to what he was doing and had a way of embodying that and playing that way in terms of all the music he would bring. It was fantastic to have known him in those ways.
Super. Well, I think we did it, my friends. Bob Abramson, by all accounts, was a master musician and master teacher. I have the reputation that preceded him, as I was starting to come up through the ranks, always mentioned all of that, and we certainly have had no shortage of these kinds of stories tonight. We are so pleased to have been able to take a little bit of time to certainly not cover everything, but to just have a nice evening of some memories and some modeling and some exercises, and to be able to remember one of the greats of our work. So thank you all so much for joining us and for sharing. Yeah, Ruth, go ahead.
Just want to thank you. I think everybody would agree with me, Steve and Veronica, for offering this wonderful workshop this evening. Thank you so much.
Sure. Tonight was meetup number 58. There are 58 hours of meetups archived on our YouTube channel, which is crazy. And beside that, we have nearly 50 hours of masterclasses that are also archived. And so if you haven't had a chance to go snooping around through the meetups, I will bet you money there is something to be found in every single one of them. Most of them, many things that we have learned so much by just working with everyone. So please go to the free archives and snoop around as much as you can. If you haven't taken too much time to think about, oh yeah, all those master classes that came and went that you either attended or had to miss, they're all available. And I really think it's still, it's a very reasonable fee, that it is almost enough to keep the VDM up and running. Not quite. So if anybody wants to contribute to the scholarship fund, we would be forever grateful. But at this point, we're very committed to trying to keep this going at least for a while longer. Please register for Kai's masterclass coming up this Saturday or Sunday, depending where you live. Come live if you can. And if you are asleep at the time that he's teaching, well, please register anyway and then just watch the recording. And then maybe we'll see everybody in Geneva or in Pittsburgh for the ICDS. Again, thanks to Veronica, my dear friend and colleague, and thanks to all of you for coming.
Thank you, everybody. So nice to see you all.
Thank you very much.
Take care.